I'm just watching this debate, eating my popcorn, so to speak, and saying like, yes, you're both right.
Welcome to the Unitarian Christian Alliance Podcast, episode 43, Good Anxiety, Good Doubt, with guest Sean Finnegan. I'm Mark Kane, back from a 3-week holiday break. It was refreshing. I did a lot of thinking and chatting with people, making some plans for this year's podcast. All good stuff. I'm excited for what we may together accomplish in 2022. I'll talk more about some plans, like the UCA events page, after the interview. Us Unitarian Christians have fewer resources available. Many who might produce content may be preoccupied navigating the difficulties with their friends, their brothers and sisters from church, or their families. When some groups list denial of the Trinity as a number one indicator of who is a cult, and we'll be talking more about that this year, it naturally generates some reticence towards speaking out, which is clearly what they want. Fear is a powerful tool, and it has been wielded effectively by many Bible-believing groups. So well, in fact, that folks can be discouraged to ask questions. Odd, is it not? Wouldn't you expect to find the most scripturally inquisitive souls in the churches? Are they not teeming with Bible aficionados who think critically about what they are hearing? These folks who dialogue with care so that together they can ensure that they don't take their faith for granted, then pressing back when a teacher seems to contradict himself, and regularly checking themselves to ensure they don't unquestioningly elevate someone else's belief to be their own. Right? The churches are full of these people, seekers, are they not? Well, yeah, that's not quite the way it is. But why? Well, we're not going to solve all of this today, but do take notice of what is driving Sean. Sean is not a typical, comfortable pew sitter who knows what he believes and is sure he's right and thus doesn't feel the need to take the time to engage. No, Sean puts his doubts to good use, and he has turned them into copious amounts of practical and insightful material. In the world of Unitarian podcasts, Sean may be the closest thing we have to ubiquitous. Well, so far. So here we are. Thank you, Sean, for joining me. I'm excited about this.
Glad to be here.
You have so much content that's already on the internet, and you've talked to so many people. I'm hoping we can steer this in a unique way that will give somebody something about Sean they have not experienced before, though we do have to cover the bases. Do you have an elevator pitch for who you are?
Well, probably the biggest thing about me that relates to this show is that I've been a pastor for almost 17 years, helping people that are in need or that are going through a lot of difficult situations. I also have a podcast, as you know, and that's my personal ministry. So like my actual job is as a pastor for Living Hope Community Church, but my sort of like on the side thing is Restitutio, where I say what I really think without fear of consequences. It's just nice to have a space where I can sort of let my hair down and say what I think. And, you know, when you're part of a team, you have to be respectful of other people on the team and what they think. And you can't just go off half-cocked. But when you're on your own podcast, you really can just say whatever you want. And I really enjoy that freedom there.
I don't have that same freedom, or at least I don't feel that way, because I feel like as a part of the UCA and the UCA podcast, I am part of a team of thousands of Unitarian Christians around the world.
Yeah.
But I don't mind it. I find that kind of constraint, it probably helps me stay focused. And it's working. We've got a lot of people connected to the UCA who then find folks like you and your podcast, or the other way around, they find your podcast and then they find us.
Yeah, I'm always promoting the UCA.
Yeah.
As a founder, I guess, of the UCA, obviously it's very dear to my heart. You know, I believe in the mission and I really want to see it succeed. So it is my delight to send people over, and I think you're doing an excellent job, Mark. I listen to just about every podcast and really enjoy them.
Well, I know how much time you don't have, so that you even have time to listen to some of my episodes is fantastic. Thank you. Speaking of time you don't have, one of the things I love about your podcast, which I think comes from your personality itself, is that it's broad. In your personal life, that's how you live too, it seems. You have a lot of unique interests.
I think what ties it all together, Mark, is that I'm a discoverer. I love travel, especially to places I have not been before. I love languages. I think they're fascinating. I want to learn them all. Obviously, that's not possible. So, I'm mainly focused on the biblical languages.
Yeah.
I like to try new things and see if I'm any good at them and then develop, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just who I am. So, I'm not just interested in doing one topic.
Mm-hmm. I've heard about some of your hobbies. I think of you as somebody reading Greek, and then I find out you do some other things.
Well, I've got a lot of different interests. And so, for example, I'm an avid sailor. I have a sailboat. I've had one for a few years now. I'm in a racing club on a local lake.
Oh, wow.
And enjoy that, although I'm not very good at it. My goal last year was to not get last place. I was in third to last place and thought it was like the best day of my life. So I'm racing against a lot of these guys that are old, and they've been racing since they were kids. So, I mean, it's not an easy thing to break into.
Is this like solo sailboat where you're out running the whole thing, or do you have a crew?
No, I have a crew. Need at least one other person.
Okay.
I'm not good enough to do it by myself. Most people aren't. You want to have one or two others. The boat weighs a couple 3,000 pounds. So, it's about 22 feet long. It takes some doing to maneuver it.
All right.
If anyone out there is a sailor, it's a Pearson Ensign class. My boat comes from the 1960s. I find that if you buy something that's that old, it's actually affordable.
That's neat.
I'm also into skiing in the winter. So I like to sail in the summer and ski in the winter. In upstate New York, we get a lot of cold weather, a lot of dark days, and usually a lot of snow. I think having something to do that harnesses those factors is really helpful for mental health. I have 4 sons. My oldest is 15 and my youngest is 4, and I've got, in between there, 10 and a 14-year-old. It's not the most enjoyable when you're the dad and you're kind of stuck on the bunny hill because you're with the little one, but you got to put in the time, and then as the years roll on, they're all going to be awesome, and we can all go on the exciting stuff.
Good family time, and afterwards, when you're done, you can go get hot chocolate and sit in the lodge and visit.
Yeah. Actually, in New York State, we have the best ski mountain on the East Coast. It's called Whiteface. It's awesome. It's a 2-3 hour drive north from my house.
Okay.
We go there once a year, and you get to the top, and you really feel like you're on top of the world.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes you can be above the clouds, and it's just the wind is whipping, and you just feel like you're on another planet.
That's cool. Well,
I'm going to talk about my risk obsession.
Yeah.
It's like such a cliche now that like Sean Finnegan is obsessed with playing Risk at New Year's. The official Facebook event basically said Sean's not allowed to play Risk when he comes to this party because everyone's just tired of me doing it. But I have a group of guys, and we play once a week, and we love it. We don't care what other people think. Somebody's got to take over the world.
Yeah.
And
we just played a few weeks ago over Christmas break with my family, and we have a 1960s set where the pieces are colored wood. It just feels right.
Yeah.
Your eclectic interests are very well represented in your podcast.
Yeah.
Why did you end up doing a podcast? Of all the things you could have done.
First of all, this is not my first podcast. This is my second podcast. My original podcast was called Truth Matters. I don't know. I did 20, 30 episodes. I had an arrangement with the Christian radio station locally to FTP them over, and they played them at a certain time once a week.
All right.
That was really cool. So I got on air locally for a while until I questioned the Trinity, and then they gave me the axe.
Oh, no.
They just summarily eliminated me. And then I told them, I said, well, we had a contract and I was supposed to get this many episodes. And they said, okay, you can have one more episode. And so I did an episode once again on the one God, and I got him to play it out.
Oh, no.
And I think that was actually Patrick Novice. This is a long time ago now, at least 10 years ago, maybe more. I was not allowed to be on Christian radio anymore.
Was that the end of the podcast or just the end of being on air on the Christian radio station?
I think I had planned out however many, and then once they gave me the axe, I already had like one or two left in the hopper.
Yeah.
And one of them never even saw the radio. It just existed on like the website and the RSS feed. So I don't know. I'm an audio guy, Mark. I love listening while doing other things. YouTube is somewhat lost on me. I'm more often going to hack the YouTube, convert it to an MP3, drop it on my phone, and make it into a podcast because, in my opinion, that's like the only usable way to consume information.
Well, that's why I like you, Sean. I think we're kindred spirits. I do the exact same thing.
Yeah. But the origin story of Restitudio goes back to my good friend Dan Wall, who's now a pastor in Arkansas. And Dan was marathon training. In the old days, as I'm sure you remember, Mark, we made cassette tapes, mixtapes, we made CDs. Then once the technology matured a little bit, we made data CDs with MP3s on them. It could fit tons and tons. Then there was this sort of awkward period between that and when people were able to use podcasts easily. So you're like still giving people CDs, but they're like, I don't have a CD player. So I would hand out a lot of like sermons, like random stuff that I'd find online. And I'd just be like, this is life-changing. You've got to listen to this. So I was kind of like a drug dealer for revival sermons and informative lectures.
Did you have like a jacket where when you opened it up, you had CDs dangling along the inside?
I wish. But I mean, I've gone places where we just like handed out CDs and tracks and you just look at it as planting seeds and hoping that some will grow. And so anyhow, my friend Dan was marathon training. He had a lot of opportunity to listen while he ran.
Okay.
So I'm like, you know what? How am I going to get, the stuff that I have, like top quality stuff into Dan Wall's ears on his iPhone? Because the iPhone was very against files. An Android could handle an MP3 file. It would be fine. But like the iPhone, it would just like didn't work well. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to put my stuff on a podcast and that's how I can get it to my friend. I'm just going to do some of these famous sermons. And then I'm like, let me throw my own stuff in there every other and see what happens. And it's totally turned into something completely different over the last, 6 years, 6 years now.
Wow.
So.
And you have how many episodes now? I can't even keep track.
424 episodes. I've got 9 classes in there. I don't have data on the first couple of years, but they say I have like something around 350,000 downloads so far. Over the last 30 days, there were 1,800 different listeners. It's been a journey, and they come from all different backgrounds. People from our background, people from totally different backgrounds. I have Trinitarian listeners. I think they get a little uncomfortable if I do one God stuff, but I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. But they're interested in the kingdom stuff. They're interested in interviews on what is going on in apologetics or cultural issues. I don't do politics. I don't think I ever will. I have no interest in politics. I have no wisdom there. Don't even ask me about it. I don't know who should do what.
Your podcast is one of the ones that I most consistently hear from other people that I connect to through the UCA. Like, yeah, I listen to Sean. I listen to Restitudio. That's a testament to the kind of content that you produce, even though few people have listened to all of your podcasts.
I don't even know if I have.
But, I like how so far in the Unitarian circles where people make different kinds of content, there are so many unique niches. And yours is one of those kinds.
Yeah.
Somebody could be listening to your podcast one week and then next week get something in an entirely new direction.
Yeah. I believe that the pastor, the Bible teacher, the professor, the minister, whatever, that bores his or her listener has committed a grave sin. And so my goal is to not bore people. I want the material to be interesting. I really strongly believe in intellectual humility. That I know I'm probably wrong on some things, Mark. I just don't know what they are. And that's part of my journey. When I came into Christianity, when I really took my faith seriously, I was 19 years old. My whole church, my whole organization, all the other churches affiliated with us, we were going through this huge transition from believing in once saved, always saved, and heaven as our hope to the kingdom of God and perseverance instead of just once saved, always saved. So, in other words, that's how I came in. So it just like imprinted itself on my spiritual DNA, my born again DNA, so that I'm always sort of like on the lookout, like what's the next thing that I do need to change or where I can learn and discover and improve. So it's really just like part of who I am because of that.
Mm-hmm. So somebody listened to every one of your podcasts. Would they detect these transitions over time? Like, do you look back at older podcasts and shake your head like, I don't really think that way anymore?
Yeah, I've definitely changed over the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. The changes that I have made, Mark, in my life, the biggest ones were early on. And then they kind of got smaller from there. So, I'm still changing and learning. Jerry just changed my mind on a huge issue about divorce and remarriage just recently. And I was just like, yeah, you're right.
It's Jerry Weirwell.
Jerry Weirwell, yeah.
He has the Proverbs podcast. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So, what would you say is the hardest part about putting together a podcast?
I would say for me, it's the stuff you do, the interviews, because it takes the most planning. Either that or the editing. I really dislike the editing process, and I'm super fast at it now, but still not fun for me.
Interesting.
Maybe like the first 2 years, it was like, oh, look at me, I'm editing audio, I'm so cool. But like now it's just like, this is just such a waste of time. Why am I such a perfectionist? But I am. I can't help it. I want the content to be tight, to be crisp, to really engage people. And if somebody goes on a 10-minute rabbit trail that dead ends somewhere, guess what? I don't want my listeners to ever know that.
Yeah.
So I think, the interviewing is hard because booking people is hard, especially because, I try to limit my evening work time.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have 4 kids in the home. Like this is my life. It's really a priority for me to spend time with them. So that makes it a little bit challenging there. And then the editing is just like the bane of my existence. But it only lasts for like a half hour to an hour. I can get it done in like an hour.
Whoa. Okay. Well, maybe in 2 years, I'll be singing your song. I spend a lot more time than that.
This is something else that is really good about our community, Mark, is that we are not in competition with each other. We're like beach balls on the waves. We're each kind of like buoying each other up into a bigger object that becomes visible from far away, the more of us there are. So it's not about, if I start a podcast, it's going to take listeners away or whatever. The right mindset is like, go. If you have a podcast in your heart, just do it. If you want to do a YouTube channel, just do it. If you want to do a blog, just do it. If you want to write a book, write it and see if you can get it published. See if somebody will pick it up. These are the kinds of things that are good for the movement, more engagement and more that is out there. I'm fans of everybody. Some more than others are of personal interest, but I'm still supportive.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, I don't even have a link to your podcast on Rest Studio. I'm so embarrassed right now. But
Sean,
by the time they listen to this, that will be fixed.
All right. Well, I'm going to leave that in the podcast, so it'll hold you accountable.
Hold on. I'm making a note because I know that talk is cheap and something in a to-do list actually gets done. All right. I wrote it.
All right. Do you have a favorite episode or a series of episodes?
I do. And it's not one that did all that well or that got that many downloads, but it's my favorite for really technical reasons.
All right.
This series of 3 interviews that I did with Maurice Chihilu, this is interviews 57, 58, and 59, God at Work in Kenya. This is from 2019. It broke my audio editing software. Like I made so many cuts that it was just like, the software started to fray apart. And after that, I had to get new software. It was just, but with that series of interviews, I went full on NPR. I interviewed 5 different people. And then I organized all the different sound bites into different categories. And then I wove together a narrative, and I did all this extra work. And I was so happy with how it turned out. And didn't seem like anybody really cared over my normal style. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not doing that again, but I'm so proud of how it came out, because it really does add so much when you have that style of different voices popping in, male voices, female voices.
Yeah.
And Maurice, for those of you who don't know him, is a superstar evangelist, pastor, bishop now, supervising over a dozen churches in Kenya. If you don't know his story, check out that podcast. Look up the word Kenya, and you'll find it.
Well, here's what we're going to do. For the people listening to this podcast who are my real friends, they know what they have to do.
Honestly, we could still be friends if you don't listen to it. I just wanted to say that one was the one I'm the proudest of as far as production. And, I actually had to go to Africa to get the audio. So come on, I was like a journalist, legit.
Yeah.
It was epic.
We'll all go listen to it again just to hear your production capabilities. Do you have any future plans for your podcast?
Oh, yeah. Got all kinds of ideas. I just got permission from a library called the Lanier Library, I think is what it's called. They have an Edward Fudge lecture that is just phenomenal about hell. Edward Fudge is now deceased. Mm-hmm. They were the ones that hold the rights to it. Getting permission can be pretty tricky when you have a one God class resting on your homepage and you're asking a Baptist organization for permission to do something. So, yeah, they gave me permission. I was like, all right, sweet. So I'm looking to probably put that out very soon. Probably by the time people listen to this, depending on when it drops, it will already be out.
Oh, cool.
And then I've got this class by Victor Gluckin that he did on Solomon.
Oh.
So it's really getting into the life of Solomon and seeing how Solomon and Jesus tie in together.
Ah.
And I was just nobody talks about Solomon. They talk about David. They talk about Jesus, sure. But who's talking about Solomon? Then I've got a number of interview options that I've brainstormed, and we'll see what develops. But the other one I just wanted to mention, especially for UCA people, is I did a lot of work on atonement theory a couple years back, and I am going to put that out. There's an audio of my presentation from a couple years back called Why Did Jesus Die? And I've never put it out. I don't know why. I think I was just too scheduled at the time. I couldn't fit it in. So Why Did Jesus Die? It's going to go through the different atonement theories that are out there and present specifically the one that I'm most attracted to, which is communal substitution. So if you're not sure what that is or you're curious about it, then stay tuned.
Nice. Do you have plans that stretch 3 to 5 years in the future?
Well, it's kind of a, all right, I have stuff randomly placed on my Excel spreadsheet that plans out the future up to the year 2024.
Good.
But the material that I have there is very gappy and very subject to, let's say, the leading of the Spirit.
Yeah.
So if I find some topic of great interest and decide to turn it into a series of interviews or a class or whatever, then everything's going to get bumped. Because my podcast isn't just interviews, I have different kinds of content, and some of it is just sitting around waiting for me to put it out. So
we have many more episodes of Restitutio to look forward to.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about pace, sustainability.
Yeah.
I work on my podcast Thursdays, not even the whole day. That's it. And Living Hope is very gracious to allow me to do that on the clock. I'm very thankful that I don't have to squeeze it in on Saturdays or something like that. So props to LHIM and their graciousness to let me do that. And it's all about consistency. I did 52 episodes last year.
Wow.
I'm going to do 52 episodes this year, unless I go a little crazy, in which case I might be doing 60 like I did 2 years ago, 64. At least that's where I'm at right now. Maybe when I get a little older, I'll just be you know what? I should take a break.
Well, like this episode will be the first one after me taking a 3-week break.
I know, man. I missed you.
Thank you. It is refreshing. It's a great time to think through the plans, where I'm going and where I've been. And in the meantime, I get some extra interviews done, so I have some audio in the queue that's ready to go.
Yeah.
It's nice to use that time to...
Yeah, we've missed your sonorous sound. Can I say something about my wife while we're here?
No.
I have the best wife. I just want to say that because if you don't have peace in your home, if you are fighting all the time or dealing with somebody that is neglectful or absent or difficult, you just can't do as much. And my wife is she's just amazing. She's very good to me. And I want to say that publicly. I don't praise her enough, Mark. I really don't. I just want to say shout out to you, Ruth. Without your support, I could not have done any of this.
In the show notes, I'll put a little time spot where this moment happens so that she can just jump right to this. And
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned LHIM a moment ago. I want to explore that for a moment because in my head, it's like, well, that's a church, but it's an organization. So help us understand that.
Okay. So my church is called Living Hope Community Church. Living Hope Community Church is part of a bigger organization called Living Hope International Ministries. And there are other Living Hope churches in other parts of the world, especially in Africa. There are 2 other brick and mortar churches, one in Kinshasa, one in Brazzaville. These are like twin cities in the 2 Congo countries. And then there are lots of house groups, home fellowships. In the United States, there are some, and then in the Philippines, Puerto Rico, those are kind of like the main areas where we have people that are connected with our ministry.
Okay.
And then there are isolated individuals that tune in to Sunday sermons and classes and stuff like that. And coming this summer/fall, I think officially it might be towards the winter, but I think it's going to launch starting in the summer. There's going to be a new church in Louisville, Kentucky that we're funding and that we're getting behind and that we're really excited about with Pastor Will Barlow. But it's not really a denomination, Mark. We call it like a network, fellowships and churches, because we're not having people send us money and everyone's pretty much independent.
Okay.
So it's much more autonomous than a actual denomination. But it is certainly a parachurch organization in the sense that our website has resources and stuff that you can use in Sunday school classes or for small groups studies. And every couple of weeks, we've got a new article that comes out. New writers writing for us now, especially Anna Brown wrote an amazing piece about her cancer journey and how she was able to interpret her faith in God, having not received a jaw-dropping miracle, but having been delivered through this incredible cancer experience so that she's now cancer-free, and how that all works out with her faith.
Well, I'll put a link directly to the story in the show notes.
Yeah, that would help.
That's Anna Brown. She was in episode 6. She worked at the Colson Center.
Yeah, funny story. You, on that interview, opened my eyes to the thought, maybe I should hire Anna Brown. And then I did. I talked to our board, and I'm like, we just need her. So thanks so much for that, Mark.
You're welcome.
Yeah, LHIM is my main thing. Restitutio is my side thing. Although, ironically, in internet land, most people know of Restitutio and not LHIM. But LHIM is, what pays the bills and what makes this other stuff possible.
Sean, one of my favorite episodes that you have is the Restorationist Manifesto, and you've published that also as a paper. It was a very thought-provoking episode. I've listened to it, I think, twice, and I'm curious how that came about.
It was my anxiety, really. And it's an anxiety I carry with me. Most anxiety is bad for you, but I think this one is good. It's an anxiety that I am going to be conformed to the shape of this world. Romans 12:2. I want to be transformed, not conformed. And I see it in myself. I see it in others. To use an analogy, we're playing in the waves on the ocean by the beach, and we're there and we're boogie boarding, we're swimming around, we're messing around on the waves. And then, an hour passes and we come out of the ocean back onto the beach, and we can't find our towels. And the whole time we were out there, we were thinking about the waves coming at us. But there was this secondary sideways current that was also pulling us in a direction that we didn't notice. So that's why we came out, a mile away from our towels and had to walk all the way back on land. That's something that I feel. I feel it. And I'm thinking to myself, how can I resist it? Or should I resist it? Because not every movement in our culture is evil. There are some good ones and some bad ones in every generation, right? So this got me to the idea of restoring authentic Christianity. And that's what Restitutio has become over the years, is more and more an effort to do that, restore authentic Christianity and live it out today. If it's restored and it's held like a museum piece, what good is it to you? You also have to live it out today. With the Restorationist Manifesto, it was like, all right, I'm going to state the principles that I think make sense to any restorationist-minded person. And I've been exposed to a lot of different forms of Christianity, Mark, when I went to seminary in Boston. Spent a lot of time with mainliners, especially United Methodists, with Unitarian Universalists, with Catholics, with lots of different denominations in that area. And some of them said to me, this is stupid. You can't turn back the clock and live out first century Christianity today. That doesn't even make sense. My response to them is, yes, I can. Watch me. I want to know, what do the apostles believe about this or that? And there are some issues, plenty of issues today, especially with technology and differences in culture, where they didn't speak on an issue. So like, what would they say on that today?
Yeah.
What principles can we use to apply to stuff today that they didn't mention that then will help us to align? Because I think that the original followers of Jesus, that they got it right. And many of us have gotten it wrong in the 21st century. I want to go back to restore authentic Christianity and live it out today. And that's what the Restorationist Manifesto is all about. It's like, well, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And, I've had some feedback on this, Mark, from other restorationist-minded people, especially from the Churches of Christ background, Stone Campbell types. Jacob Rohr and I, when he was working with us as a worship pastor, we drove around town and we just dropped off this Restoration Manifesto to other pastors and said, what do you think about this? And nobody was interested. We even went to these Church of Christ churches and they're just like, whatever. But I have heard back, especially from the Restorationists in Australia, and they've said, hey, this really sounds like what Stone and Campbell were doing in the 1800s. I'm trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the apostolic. Let's get back to New Testament Christianity. Let's go behind that iron curtain of the 4th century creeds. Let's get behind that and go back to the earlier forms. So to me, that's exciting.
Now, had you tried nailing it to the church's doors?
No, I have not tried nailing it.
Do that next time.
Around me, it's really tough. It's a very post-Christian area. There are a few Bible-believing churches, but they've already kind of circled the wagons. It's hard to make friends when, the Trinity does step in there as a shibboleth. And if you don't say shibboleth, you say sibboleth, they cut your head off.
What I notice a lot, there is an affinity toward Christian tradition, love for tradition. I had written up some kind of like a book, a lot of the ideas and things that I'd been thinking about. And I gave it to somebody and I said, check this out. And they read through it and they said, well, this is good, but there's nothing in here about church tradition. And it's like, well, no, that it wasn't supposed to be about tradition. It was my understanding of the Bible.
I grew up in my parents were in a very anti-tradition ministry. So I kind of grew up with this attitude that said tradition is always bad all the time. And what I've come to see is that, first of all, that's a tradition itself.
Yeah.
And second of all, no, not all traditions are bad. Having a communion service or celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, these are traditions that go back to the very first century. Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 15 how he received from them a list of appearances about Christ, and he's handed it over to the Corinthian church, and he wants them to teach others about it as well. And that, there are a lot of traditions that are good. The point is evaluate everything. Like I end every episode with, the truth has nothing to fear. Like, look, if this thing is really true, if it really stands up to scrutiny, then you will have increased faith in it. And so doubt can be your servant. Doubt will lead you to discard what is false and lead you to discover how strong what you believe is true is. Because when you doubt it, that gives you an opportunity to give reasons for why it is true or it is false. And if it stands that test, then you have more confidence.
Yeah.
And what we need is less Christians overconfident in doubtful ideas and practices, right? And that's the task of restorationism.
Yeah.
I just listened to a Bill Schlegel podcast, really interesting one, where he talks about communion. He hasn't had communion in the United States in a very long time, and he went to this mega church just a week or two ago. And they handed him this hermetically sealed little plastic cup with the styrofoam like all boxed in and very sanitized. And he just didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
Because that's not his tradition. He's like, what is this weird American, like, what is this? And because he's an outsider, he could question that tradition of doing it that way.
Yeah.
Right?
For me, it's recognizing when something is a tradition and when something isn't. If you can understand, this is a tradition and it's possible that we might switch it. Like some churches have organ music. It's just the way they do it.
Yeah.
But that is a tradition. It's possible that one day the organist will be sick and you won't have organ music. Or somebody with a guitar will show up and say, I would love to play music.
Yeah. Or some of those old hymns, they were bar songs originally. And, somebody just took the tune and wrote Christian lyrics, and like, here's this sweet old lady, 200 years later singing this song, and she's like, oh, I love the melody or whatever. And it's just like, this is a bar tune.
Yeah.
But who cares? If you like it, if it's edifying, then go for it. But don't tell me that's the only way to do it, is just 4-part harmony in a hymn book. And I love that stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm a music guy. I love choruses. I love oratorios. I'm into it. But not everybody is.
That's true. Well, the Restorationist Manifesto was episode 88.
Yeah.
That is a good one to listen to.
Yeah.
Plus, there's the paper, and I'll put a link to the paper in the show notes.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of papers on Restitutio. Most people know Restitutio for the podcast, but I've got some YouTube videos. I've got some articles and 2 ebooks. If you subscribe to email, you get the ebooks for free. They're just like dealing with cultural issues, like what's going on in the world and how does Christianity interact with that? It's the living it out today side of things.
Yeah. So, Sean, what kind of other projects, we've talked about the podcast. Talk about some of the things that are coming up that would be of interest to the UCA audience.
Well, 2 things very quickly. One is I have a Kingdom of God book that I've been working on for like 10 years, and I finally finished it. I'm hoping to have that out in 2022. I finished it the last day of 2021. But now it's getting edited, and then we're going to try to get it published.
Cool.
So that's one thing. The other thing is, and I'm so excited about this, I'm looking to gather together primary source material on all the dynamic monarchians of the first 1,500 years of church history.
Wow.
And so a dynamic monarchian is a Christian who believes, like the UCA, that the Father is the only true God, but does not believe in pre-existence. There's not much literature written by dynamic monarchians that survives.
Right.
However, their enemies did write about them. And so I'm collecting the various material that traces the different groups of dynamic monarchians in the 2nd century, in the 3rd century, in the 4th century, in the 5th century. And then I did find some stuff in the medieval period that I'm super excited about, but I'm not 100% sure on it. So it's a research project, and stay tuned. I may be putting that out as a book that people could use to write their own papers and produce their own content from, because we're just talking about a source book. I'm not talking about writing a history, just like all of the quotes about these guys in chronological order. So then you can make of it what you will in your own research.
Yeah, that ties in with the next book that the UCA is going to be publishing, the Dynamic Monarchian book.
Right. It would serve as a nice companion to the Dynamic Monarchian. That's actually a history where Gass is actually writing what he thinks about these different things. I'm talking about a reader where I'm just providing the source material.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be a nice companion.
Yeah, that would work nice. Well, in a few days, we will drop the UCA session that you gave back in October. The Father is greater than I.
All right. So this is the idea of subordinationism. The idea is simply that the Father is greater than the Son submits to the Father. I found this incredible debate from the year 2008, which you can go watch, between Wayne Grudem and Keith Yandel. Actually, it was a 2-on-2, but those were the two main guys. Wayne Grudem is like the author of the famous systematic theology book that all the Baptists love, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Wayne Grudem argues that the Son is eternally subordinate, functionally subordinate to the Father. And Keith Yandel argues that if the Son is eternally subordinate to the Father, then he must be ontologically subordinate as well. And I'm just watching this debate, eating my popcorn, so to speak, and saying like, yes, you're both right. He is eternally functionally subordinate and eternally ontologically subordinate. So like, I want to say yes, and where does that leave us? So that's kind of like the angle of my papers, interacting with their scholarship a little bit and presenting a way forward to consider a Son that is not equal to the Father. And I think that's what we see in the Scripture.
Yeah.
I tried to find every single verse on the subject, Mark. I read the entire New Testament for this project. I circled every single verse that I thought related. For the Old Testament, I did cover some of the Messianic prophecies, but I think it would have been overwhelming for the paper to do the whole Old Testament too.
Well, it was a great presentation. I love that you covered before, like in the Old Testament, during the ministry of Jesus, and then after. That breadth was just really good. It was very unique, and I hadn't heard it that way before. Yeah. So I liked it. Well, Sean, I appreciate the time you spent with me today. This was a lot of fun because we're both on the board of the UCA, so we see each other fairly often. So, but it's still fun, Sean.
Yeah. We're like Pinky and the Brain. What are you going to do today? Take over the world? That's right. One podcast at a time, baby.
We're getting there. I wish you well in all your upcoming projects, and say thanks to your wife.
I will. Appreciate the time, Mark.
I hope you find Sean's presentation, The Father is Greater Than I, to be helpful. It will appear this Friday on the Unitarian Christian Alliance YouTube channel. If you are subscribed to that channel, you'll get a notification.
So I watched a movie about Jesus recently that has no action or drama. Even Jesus is subordinate.
Okay, I'll give you a moment to think on that. Okay, you'll recall that I put out a call for Unitarian knock-knock jokes some time back. There weren't a flood of submissions. We had our first ever back in episode 31, and it was this guy, Brandon Russell. I like his sense of humor, and I appreciate that he's still thinking of me. And by extension, you. If you still didn't get the humor, jump back 45 seconds and listen to it again. Brandon, nice wordplay. That's worthy of a future compilation episode, the best of the UCA podcast Unitarian jokes. At this rate, though, don't hold your breath for that show.
Hi, Mark. My name's Darcey. I live in England, and I'm sitting here on a Sunday afternoon before I go and sing again for Advent. I really am blessed, and thank you so much for your podcast and for Dale Tuggy's and Sean Finnegan's and, all of the Unitarian Christian Alliance people. It's fantastic. Thanks so much for your interview of Philippus. What an amazing experience and positiveness about the way people handled Philippus rather than some of your other stories that have been really quite distressing. Anyway, I live in Manchester in England, and I was just bowled over to think that we would be able to have a conference in Europe, even though UK has just left Europe. Crazy people. It would be just fantastic. And so, let's do it. See ya.
Oh, thank you, Darcey. I appreciate your kind words, and I do hope we can get not just a UCA conference, but many events taking place in Europe. To help make these events known, I recently announced plans for the events listing we will be adding to the UCA website. Well, we have a kind soul who willingly, with no arm twisting or guilt-infused manipulation, volunteered to help us get that done. Actually, I really didn't trick her into it. Amanda Dunn, episodes 33 and 34, volunteered entirely on her own, and we're super excited. We are setting up the page now, and I hope to announce it on the next episode. So, are you planning a special event in your area? Would your event welcome the broader Unitarian Christian community? Will it help to connect the isolated, encourage the struggling, and foster a deeper desire for God's truth? Then this is for you. We will gladly help get your event into the public eye. Additionally, I'll briefly remind people in this podcast when events are coming up so that they can go to the site and learn more. It's free advertising, baby. So stay tuned. It's almost ready to go. You too can be like Brandon and Darcey. Let me know what you're thinking about or joking about, and drop me a bit of audio. There's a record link in the show notes, or just record some audio and email it to me, podcast@unitarianchristianalliance.org. That email accepts written words too, but it really beams with pride when it delivers audio content to me. A reminder that these episodes can also be found on YouTube. It's just the audio and the cover art. But if you are one of those who grew up attending AC/DC concerts or playing a tin whistle in the upper octave for weekly Irish music sessions, you may appreciate this. YouTube has a feature for those hard of hearing, closed captioning. It's automated and isn't perfect, but it is a great help if you need it. So if you're one of us terrible folks who prefers the simpler teachings of the disciples and apostles over the later philosophy-soaked obscurities of the Catholic creeds, then maybe consider becoming a member of the UCA. You can do that for free or select a subscription amount. You'll get your spot on the amazing UCA membership map, and you can read the profiles of others. Then contact those in your area for possible fellowship. Learn more at unitarianchristianalliance.org, and be sure to check out the UCA affirmation in the About menu. Coming soon, the story of a young woman who just recently got her bachelor's degree from a private Baptist university and lived to tell the tale. If you have a friend who has been thinking about starting a podcast, maybe suggest this episode. I suspect she'll appreciate hearing Sean's story, his philosophy, and a few details about how he does it. We need more beach balls. Sean, thank you for a pleasant visit, some good laughs, and for the reminder, once again, that truth has nothing to fear. May God bless you in your truth pursuits. I hope this podcast serves you well.
Even Jesus is subordinate.